First thing I want to say, I want to give thanks and praise to the Creator. I want to say, Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, in the Hebrew tongue of ancient Hebrew, post-Babylonian, which means, blessed be Yahweh or Yahweh, the King of the universe. How did Nyabingi started? Nyabingi started from beginning of time. Nyabingi is an aspect of the Mashiach as seen from the Yahudim, or the Israelites in Africa, in our exile after the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD, as we were scattered over Arabia, North Africa, and all the way to the tips of Africa before the second Babylonian captivity, here under the eagle in the northwest country, which is Deuteronomy 23rd chapter. What happened is that our people had aspects of returning home to Zion, not knowing that parts of the so-called African continent, or the African continent, which was originally called Ori, the Western Garden, on the east side of the Nile to the Tigris and Euphrates River, Zion, our people had aspirations of a freedom fighter that was going to return us home. Some brothers and sisters, scholars, rabbis, teachers, poets say that was Nyabingi, which is the aspect of the Mashiach or Christ in his warlike aspect as the conquering lion, which deals with the book of Revelation, the conquering lion of the tribe of Judah. Also Nyabingi, which is verified by Daniel the 9th chapter, the reason why on the other flag out there we use a black lion with a silver mane. Behold, on which the ancients of days did sit down, whose hair was of lamb's wool, and feet of bondage brass. As you know, bondage brass is this color, burnt in a furnace. So us being the original man, we do not advocate any doctrines of supremacy, for we understand that all people, black, brown, red, yellow, and white, all come from the original man, which is the black man. It doesn't make us better, superior, or worse. We're not inferior or superior. All human beings are one human family and many nations. So Nyabingi comes from that freedom aspect. I just found out from talking to some rabbis and looking at the History Network, which I never found out, that even after the Ark of the Covenant was purportedly moved to Ethiopia, which was called Abyssinia, some of the scholars from around the African continent went to Yemen first, and then they went to Ethiopia looking for the Ark of the Covenant. And they made copies of the Ark of the Covenant and put it in a big drum, which was called the Nyabingi drum. Because they couldn't take the actual Ark of the Covenant, they used a drum and took the Holy Torah scrolls, or the Ten Commandments, and took them around Africa and taught them to the various Yahudim, even before the coming of Islam, and even far beyond what the Roman Empire penetrated, which some Europeans say were pagan nations or nations of darkest Africa. But in reality, there was always civilization in the Ohia continent, or the Obia continent. Legends go back in Ethiopian legends of the legends of Atlantis, which took place in Ethiopia. He gave those legends to Plato through the Egyptian scribe, and Solon, which passed on to the Greeks. All this took place before the flood, and it took place in Africa. It took place from West Africa all the way to Asia before the flood. So Nyabingi is those aspects where we want a return of the Mashiach, that man who some elders say was slain on a tree. Now that's a great controversy, because that great controversy deals with whether you believe in the coming of Mashiach, he came and he was slain, or it's like some of the Yahudim, which people call Jewish people, which was converts to the Yahweh's true way of life and held on to the culture. Some people believe that they're waiting on him to come and he didn't come. And some people, and some scriptures say, Hebrew scriptures say he came 3 times. I believe no matter, I know that in my heart, I believe in Yahweh and all his manifestation, all its manifestations. And by Yahweh being the God of gods and supreme being of the universe, he can come any way he wants. And I will accept him however he come, as long as I'm liberated and this earth is liberated. But here in the hells of North America, I have not been liberated. I am still sitting here in bondage as a testimony till we came here in 1619. And we landed on Wall Street. That's why it's called Wall Street. So we became the foundations of this present Western civilization. Not saying it's bad or good, because we've brought great blessings to America. We brought inventions to America. We brought our labor to America. So Nyabingi is that aspect. My name is the Yoruba temple top raised me up at 12 years old. They gave me first name as Bashamba. Bashamba meant the rejected stone. As I traveled on, I was given another name. When I met the Honorable Bob Marley, who's known as in his Ethiopian Coptic church as Bernhain Selassie, and by the culture music as Oshia, I was given the name Nyabingi when I met him for the second time on his show in 1978 when he came here. I met Bob Marley previously in 1970 or at the end of 69 when I was leaving Operation Breadbasket hosted by Reverend Jesse Jackson. At that time I was a member of the Brothers of Ghetto band, the Brothers of the Ghetto, the legendary Brothers of Ghetto, which consisted of Richard Reese, Harold Jones, Luke, and Sylvester. We were the original Brothers of the Ghetto, High Park's legendary Brothers of the Ghetto. And we was leaving the black room in a rehearsal on 79th and Halsted. We went into Walgreens after rehearsal, 3 of us, and we seen this brother on his knees putting goods on the shelves. We came in there now, being an ex-member of the Black Panther Party. We came in our Black Panther uniforms and field jackets and Black Liberation flags, had our hair in rubber bands, our braids and stuff, because we previously found out a little about locks from the brother that played in Woodstock. We walked in there and there was Bob Marley on the floor, loading goods into Walgreens, which is a hidden history. They say Bob Marley went everywhere, but they never say he landed in Inglewood, Chicago, the neighborhood of Inglewood, 79th and Halsted. And I said to Bob Marley, nigga, what's wrong with your head? You haven't combed your head in years. And Bob Marley didn't even get upset. He said to me, he said, brother, I am a Rastafarian, and these are what the world calls dreadlocks. And I believe in the coming of the Messiah. And he told me he has an album coming, a record coming out called I Shot the Sheriff. We said, this guy's just talking. We being struggling musicians, he's working in Walgreens as a stock boy. We couldn't believe it. But later, Eric Clapton did his song, and we played Bob Marley's song for years on the funk and rock circuit, the black funk and the black rock circuit, which is another story of the suppression of so-called Israelite or African culture in the United States. The vampirism and suppression of our culture. So later, my brother Edward went to the Navy, and he brought back later, as I moved and left the Brothers of the Ghetto, he brought back a album cover with Bob Marley's first album cover on there. And on it, it had the Ites, the gold and the green flag. Okay. Years passed. I think that was about 1972. Years passed. I met a brother named Wayne Scott who had a studio in in 1975, 4 or 5. He had a studio called Profile Sounds. We used to be on 75th and Exchange. My brother was a scholar, ex-Blackstone Ranger. He was a scholar, just like I was an ex-GD, Growth and Development. Never was a game banger or anything like that, but I adhere to certain principles, which today you hear about Crips and Bloods and this and that. You can't help what neighborhood you grew up in. We all one army, one people. We all came on a slave ship, so we don't get into that hatred. We get into higher overstanding on who we are. Lost sheep of the tribes of Israel. Whether you landed in Trenchtown, whether you landed in Brazil, wherever you landed in our diaspora, you are that people according to Deuteronomy 23rd chapter, else you would not be here. Because Islamic soldiers didn't put other Islamic soldiers in slavery. Pagans didn't put pagans in slavery. They gathered up according to the Creator, Yuhewaheh, the remnant of the 12 tribes of Israel, because are disobedient of the Creator and His commandments. So moving on with the origin of Nyabingi. Nyabingi started where they was carrying that belief around the African continent in a drum and spouting out on the Shabbat day the lessons of the 10 Commandments handed down by Brother Moshe on Mount Horeb. This happened for years, even when Timbuktu was rising. Empires that came and fell was forgotten, like the Zarian Empire, which existed in North Africa, which was a Hebrew Israelite empire. Various empires in Yemen, which today they call Yemen and Arabia. Various empires in Ethiopia. Various Hebrew Israelite empires. We hear a lot about the Islamic empires that came after, but history, and I take good study and good contradiction and conflict with that name, because history is just another name for me for Hitler, which is Histor. So I wonder, is that our story, like the Great Steel Pulse band says, our story. This is I version, no King James version. See? So moving on with Nyabingi, all that history has been deliberately forgotten by universities. While I studied in parts of the University of Chicago with one of my friends, Brother Shoye, when we were studying the ancient Kanak script, which today it's called Proto-Hebrew, which is pre-Babylonian exile. Today we're dealing with what is known as the modern script, or the square block letters, which some purport that Yahshua HaMashiach spoke, but those are post-Babylonian. Okay, we dealing with the ancient Yuhewahid tongue, the language of the universe, which is Yahweh. Before before Nimrod built his empire. So Nyabingi is that aspect of the Mashiach. As a musical form, we was all influenced by people like Sun Ra. The Creator has a master plan. Miles Davis, a lot of jazz artists, the AACM, the Sun Drummers, Chicago Sun Drummers, which gave birth to Montu dancers with Brother Moshe. Actually, Chucky, one of the brothers started Conquer Line Record Shop, lived with Brother Moshe years, the founder of the Sun Drummers, and they helped him get his start. I remember before Haile Selassie's birthday, the brothers and sisters, which descended all the way from Marcus Garvey, used to speak on soapboxes in Washington Park. So as Nyabingi, we always wanted a music that was going to express, not punk rock or changing our music or hard rock, even though Jimi Hendrix was one of the greatest artists in the history of mankind. He was the guru of rock music. And Little Richard did invent rock and roll, and Chuck Berry. And they never got nothing out of it. However we feel about Little Richard, he must be respected for who he is, not just a Baptist boy, because he's raising up a lot of people, and he has. And we stand on the shoulders of our ancestors that go all the way back to Adam and Eve, unbroken, through Haile Selassie, straight to Solomon. Swang? So, Nyabingi, we looked for a sound. And before I gathered Nyabingi came when I was studying under the New Era International Africanium, which used to be on 6310 South Kimbach, where I was the percussionist for Dr. Sahara and Dr. Katili, as they spoke to the elite and the leaders of the black community, including Harold Washington, Hakeem Metabuti, Hannibal F. Freak, and all the great leaders and cultural and spiritual leaders that came out of the cultural movement in Chicago. I was the brother playing the drums, Nyabingi drums behind them. Even before Montu and Son drummers came, it was Nyabingi, Zea Yahweh that was doing that work. And so, my brothers and sisters, out of New Era International Africanium, in Wayne's studio called Pro Fire, I left the Brothers of the Ghetto band and said I cannot play any more slave music just to make it. I'm going to play reggae. And that was in like 1974. And I met Wayne Scott, I had on a red tam. And Wayne took me in. He became my guitar teacher, keyboard teacher. And I studied with him for a little while. Then I went to Malcolm X College, where I met the great, one of the founders of the Wailers, Junior Bretwith. We was in the same piano class. And he told me, he said, by then Bob Marley had his first album out, and he was beginning to make headway. He said, I am one of the founders of the original Wailers. And I said, Zario, you're joking. Again, I acted in disbelief. I acted like Doubting Thomas in disbelief. I said, nigga, you lost your mind. You ain't founded the Wailers until I heard that brother sing. That was a songbird. Bob Marley couldn't even touch Junior Bretwith. Junior Bretwith could play a piano, Dixieland piano, and his fingers glid across the keys with no effort. And when he sung like an earthquake. And later, Bob proved that to me when I met Bob for the second time. And I said, man, let's form us a band. You know, and Zaria said, yeah. And I said, I work in New Era International Africanium.
Clear.